We've now finished our heel turn and we're ready to pick up stitches to re-establish the round and create a gusset. And here on our finished sock we can have a look at where that is with our heel flap, our heel turn, and there's this little wedge of fabric right here which is the gusset, and that allows us to have enough space in the sock to go around that biggest part of your foot and ankle there. So in order to create that, our first instruction is to knit across those stitches of the heel flap that are left so that we are in position to pick up stitches along the side of the heel flap from the right side. So to pick up stitches, I find it easier to hold the yarn in my left hand and kind of have a sort of continental or crochet hold on the yarn. And then with the tip of the needle in my right hand, I'm going to search out that column of slipped stitches that we have along the edge here, and I'm going to pick up each stitch from below sort of both legs of that slip stitch. So this first one, let's see if I can make sure I get it nice and close so you can see. I am going to go in this first stitch here under both legs, wrap the yarn around and pull it back through. I'm going to pull it a little more tightly than I normally would. And then the second stitch, can you see it there? Under both legs and pull it through again. I'm going to continue doing that all the way along the edge here, and I have a specific number of stitches which should line up plus or minus 1 with the number of slip stitches that I have. I've picked up all the stitches I can along my slip stitches, and I still have one more stitch to pick up. And this space here, right between where the top of the foot meets the heel flap, is a classic place for a big hole to be. Because you're kind of changing direction, and you can see how it's very possible to get a big hole in that space. So I have one more stitch to pick up, and what I'm going to do is pick it up right into that fabric. So I'm not going to go under one strand. Just like with my slip stitches, I want to get a little more substantial fabric in there. So I'm going to go into the middle of the stitch in a sort of row and a half below where I have been picking up stitches. And now I have the correct number for the side of my gusset, and I have a little insurance for holes in that space. And then I'm going to pull and arrange my stitches, my needle rather, so that I can knit across the top of the foot as well. And it'll just be easier if I pull a little bit of cable through. With double pointed needles, that's obviously no rearrangement needed, but I'm just going to work across the top of these stitches. And then I'll pick up stitches along the other side of the heel flap as well. Just as along the first side, on this side we have again a gap between that first slip stitch, which is just here, and where the yarn is coming from. There's this little gap here. So again, I am going to pop down here about 1.5 stitches below and pick up my first stitch in that space. And then, just like I did on the other side, I'm going to pick up the same number of stitches all the way up this edge as well. Now I've picked up all the stitches along the sides of the gusset, and I'm ready to start working in the round again. And the first thing we're going to do is re-establish the beginning of round. So what we want is to put the beginning of the round right in the middle of our heel so that it's all nice and symmetrical. So I'm going to knit to that space and then rearrange my needles so that I still have a sort of half and half on each side of my long circular. And then I'm ready to begin the gusset decreases, because we've added in a number of stitches by picking up stitches along the side of our heel flap. And now we're going to decrease out again until we get to that ideal circumference for your foot again. Now that I've rearranged my needles so that I have half and half and the round starts right in the middle of the heel, and I've double checked, I've counted the stitches again, made sure I had the right number, I'm ready to work my gusset setup round. And the gusset setup round is just a knitting around, but we're going to work these stitches along the side of the heel flap by knitting them through the back loop to tighten them up. I finished my gusset setup round, and now I'm ready to begin working the gusset decreases. And the instruction for that is to knit to 3 stitches before the start of the instep or top of the foot, and then we're going to work a decrease. So the top of the foot is right where we have a column of stitches that sort of continues on from the leg. So this stitch right here is the top, the last stitch of my instep. So it has a column of stitches below it that go all the way up the leg here. This is the last stitch of the gusset. Do you see how it's coming out of the side of my heel flap? So I'm going to work to 3 stitches before the beginning of my instep. So that's the beginning of the instep. I'm going to work to 1, 2, 3 stitches here, and then I'm going to work a decrease over these 2 stitches, and the same thing in the mirror image on the other side. Now, if you are inclined to miss that place, as I often am, I get distracted and I'm not entirely sure, unless I'm looking very closely, where the top of the instep is. This is a great time to pop a stitch marker in on this side and also on this side. And we can see the same thing on the other side. Here is a column of stitches. And so that's the last stitch of the instep. And this is the first or last stitch of the gusset. And so I'm going to be working a decrease over these stitches. So putting a stitch marker in here and on this side here is a great idea. And I'm going to go get some stitch markers and do that myself. Okay, I've popped my stitch markers in and I've worked my foot until 3 stitches before the instep. And then we're going to work a decrease. Our first decrease is a knit 2 together. So a right leaning decrease. I'm going to go in there, knit those 2 together. And then I'll knit 1, slip my marker, and work to the other marker. I've worked across the top of the foot to the next marker. I've slipped that marker, I knit 1, and then I work a left leaning decrease, which in this case is our slip 1 knitwise, knit 1, pass our slip stitch over. And then I'm going to work back to the beginning of our round at the middle of the heel. We're going to work a plain round, just knitting around, and then another decrease, just like the one we just worked. You're going to repeat those 2 until you have the necessary number of stitches, which means that you've decreased out all those gusset stitches and you're back to the original circumference of your leg, and that'll be the same circumference as your foot. And so I will check back in with you when I have finished that. And here's my finished gusset with the line of decreases there. And all that's left to do now is to knit the length of the foot minus around 5 centimeters, and then you'll begin the toe. It's easy to make that foot longer or shorter as you need it to be by working more or fewer rounds. But once you've knit the foot, come back in and we will knit the toe together.